Now, even if you don't have an interest in the environment and global warming, I'd be surprised if you didn't hear at least a little about what happened at the 26th Conference of the Parties, otherwise known as COP26. The pledges and promises to help reduce global warming by 2050 may have been overshadowed by the spat over submarines between the French President Emmanuel Macron and the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. But to update you on the progress of COP26 is another Scott. Scott Hamilton is an author, researcher, and policy advisor when it comes to renewable energy. You last heard from him on this program a while ago when he spoke about the green hydrogen potential here in the top end. Scott, good morning to you.
Hello, Joel. How are you today?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good, thanks. What about you? It's been a big week at COP26. What have you made of it?
It has been a huge week. And it actually, there's been a number of really good things that have happened coming out of the COP. And I suppose just to get back to the fundamentals, Joel, that really the COP, the Conference of the Parties, which was in Glasgow, was the biggest conference since the Paris conference back in 2015. Mm-hmm. Now, that's when the world came to set its pledge and its goals to keep global warming as close to 1.5 degrees and under 2 degrees. So that's what it was all about. And that's what it is being measured up against, about how successful the pledges and the commitments were to keep under 2 degrees and as close as possible to 1.5 degrees warming.
What sort of progress are we making, Scott?
Well, the good news is there has been some significant progress. So prior to the COP, we were projected to be well over 2 degrees by the end of the century. Now, as we know, that's when we get catastrophic climate change, sort of droughts, bushfires and extreme weather events. And importantly for places like the Northern Territory, the killing of our coral reefs and those sorts of things, and impacts on our fish stocks and our biodiversity. So prior to Glasgow, we were the pledges, if you added them all up from all the various countries, they were over 2 degrees. And now, with the new pledges that have been made, thanks to the likes of the US and the European Union and others, they're now just under 2 degrees. So the forecast pledges are about 1.9 degrees, which is good that it's below 2 degrees, but that's still not 1.5. So there's still work to go, I suppose, Joel, is what I would say is the conclusion there.
Have you seen anything that's really stands out to you that's missing in terms of the direction that they're going to go, these countries, what we are all going to have to do?
Yeah, so the really big debates were over the 2030 targets, so what's going to happen in this next 10 years. Now, sadly, Australia didn't increase its 2015 targets, so it's got relatively weak targets of 26 to 28% by 2030. And really what it needs to have is 50% cuts by 2030. And it just didn't go there. So Australia's certainly not lifting its weight. The other two big issues which were debated at the COP, and there was some progress, again, some good news and some bad news. One was about what was the methane pledge. And again, this is very important for the territory because it's really a commitment by some of the biggest countries in the world, including the US, to cut methane emissions, which are one of the greenhouse gases, about 80 times more potent to global warming than carbon dioxide, but to cut about 30% of the world's methane emissions by 2030. Now, a number of the big countries got up and supported that, including the US and, again, UK and others, but we didn't go there as well, which was sad to see. And the other final one, which was very important, was the phasing out of coal and getting out of coal plants. So there was a commitment to stop funding fossil fuels and to phase out coal power. Now, on this one, we saw some of the countries like Canada, the UK and New Zealand all pledging to get on board with this. But the big countries in this case, the US and Australia and China and India, of course, weren't pledging to do this. So they weren't as serious in this space as what we would have liked. But one of the interesting things on this one, Joel, is that South Korea, which is one of our biggest coal takers from Australia, takes about a whopping 16% of our coal that's exported, has pledged to get out of coal. So South Korea, Vietnam, a lot of our main trading players are making this step, which means we've got to get on and start changing our system and what we export and those things.
Yeah, well, there's some good news, some not so good news, and some really interesting developments too there, by the sound of it, Scott.
Certainly, Joel. It is really exciting times in some respects, but also very challenging. We're still right on the precipice.
Now, we're not far away from the 11 o'clock news, Scott, but just quickly, the renewables energy and the industry here in the top end, or the Northern Territory at least, is in a pretty decent position to thrive, isn't it?
It is in an excellent position, and it was fascinating that Angus Taylor, the Australian minister, actually wanted to be at the Sun Cable stand at Glasgow when he was talking to his Indonesian counterparts. So this is Sun Cable, which is going to be, if it gets up, it's backed by Mike Cannon-Brookes and Twiggy Forrest, the world's biggest power station. And it's going to mean a massive 20 gigawatts of solar arrays, which is just huge. So the biggest power station in Australia is currently about 3 gigawatts, just to put that into perspective, and a cable running from Darwin to Indonesia to Singapore, because Singapore have also pledged to get off gas as well. So this is the way they're going to replace their electricity needs into the future, about 15% of their needs, starting from a few years if it all goes well. But it's a very exciting project. That means jobs, investment for Darwin and the Territory. It's a terrific story.
Oh, yeah, the logistics of it, just laying cables all that way, just boggles the mind.
4,200 kilometres, I think.
And it won't just be power cables going in there too, I'm led to believe. There'll be other bits and pieces going in there too, which is, makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And the thing which we'll be very keen to see, and one of the things that I'm pushing strongly, is to start to also produce green hydrogen in Darwin, which allows us to also produce green ammonia and also metals and other processes. So that's the sort of next step, and I'll be certainly encouraging my colleagues and other industry players such as Mike Cannon-Brookes and Twiggy Forrest to start investing in that sort of space.
Oh, well, very good. Scott, we'll leave it there because we've got to go, but lovely to talk to you this morning. Thanks for the update.